So India has always been a gig economy. I think this is the terminology that has come in recently. So someone who just enters that for a year, right, will find it very difficult to actually complete that learning cycle before they move on to the next. Multitasking does not help, and hence focus in a distracted world is extremely important. Now, if you have completed, let's say, one leg of the HR journey, right, where you've done different roles in HR, different locations, etc., it might make some sense to do a non-HR role that helps you become a CHRO in the future.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of BigSmall Talk. And I hope all our listeners are doing well today. And it's been few weeks into New Year, and I hope you're all solid in track with your New Year resolutions and decisions and goals you've planned for 2023. So today here we have with us a very eminent personality, a corporate leader, and it's none other than Debashish Majumdar. So first of all, welcome to our podcast. And secondly, it's indeed my privilege to host you today. So, sir, I would love to talk about how you've built your career and introduce you to our audience and listeners. But it's always extra sweet if we could hear your personal experience and your personal journey from the owner itself, right? So if you could just tell our audience about how you built your career from 2010 to moving from chemical engineering to what you are today, which is Associate Vice President at Godrej Capital. So if you could just tell our listeners about your journey.
So actually, I think people decide their career, and there's no right age to start off, right, of how you would want to build your career. But then I was early on in school very clear that I'll do a 4+2, which is 4 years engineering and 2 years MBA. Get that education out of the way, because maybe it's individual specific, but I didn't have it in me to really do a job, prepare for an MBA while doing a job, and then go for that MBA, right? So I thought, okay, let's get out of the way, and then so I was very clear. So I did my chemical engineering from BITS Pilani, and then I did my MBA in HR from XLRI. That was it. In 6 years' time, I was done with the education, and that was the thought process of getting the formal, education out of the way, because degrees are important, at least in the Indian context. So I think that was important, and there was also the realization in these 6 years that while till school you are in a particular shell, right? You do come out when you interact with people of different personalities, and your mind really opens up, right? And in these 6 years, I also realized that you will have to upskill yourself. And learning is a continuous journey. And then you learn every day. You do certain certification courses, and it's not like our parents or their grandparents that you get out of education and 30 years you're doing the same job, right? So I think getting a sense of the market, right, and reacting to it, or being proactive about it, becomes extremely important. So I think in those 6 years, I pretty much realized that that's how I needed to go about my career journey.
And so if you talk about our audience, so we cater to different segments. We have people who are aspiring to be an MBA graduate. We have people who are out of their MBA and who are doing, who have entered the corporate life. At the same time, we have people who are a little bit amount of work experience or more. So today's discussion that we would be having, I want to cover topics that are related to everybody. So as you told, you were very clear about the fact that you wanted a 4+2 sort of engineering. Now, something that I resonated with your journey was that, just like you, even I'm a chemical engineer by undergraduation. So what I had after my undergraduation was that I entered a job which was completely different from chemical engineering. So at that point of time, there is an obvious question that comes up into mind, saying that, did you waste the 4 years that you were studying? Because now you've entered something very different. And is this the right decision that I've made in life? And I'm sure going ahead in the future also, I'll be facing multiple questions like this. So I want you to address that particular sector who is at this point a little confused, because you have had these many years of experience, and you've seen multiple stages in life where even you've questioned your decisions as well. So if you could address those categories and give experiences from your life as well, where you've questioned your decisions, and what motivates you to go ahead and stay strong with those decisions. And if not, have you ever regretted any decisions that you've taken?
I think I follow the YOLO mindset. You only live once, so to that extent, I don't regret. But there are learnings. You learn from your failures, and if you don't, you end up repeating them. So it's important to learn and move ahead, but not be too stuck up and think about, because that creates a lot of anxiety. And it's better to take that one step every day towards a new goal rather than look at the past. Right. So I think that perspective is very important. Yes, in terms of questioning, when I gave a lot of these entrance exams for my MBA, right? So you don't naturally think that you'll land up in HR, right? So to that extent, I did question whether I should go for a, let's say, a business management kind of course, or should I go for a pure HR course, right? And this was an HR course from XLRI, which was all 2 years in HR, right? So to that extent, I think I did question, right? And I took guidance from a number of leaders in certain coaching institutes, certain of my seniors, right? And more from understanding what these jobs will entail. And secondly, them being very close to me, they would have seen me what I did not see about myself, right? So the blind spots, they helped me discover that. And that's where I realized that, yes, I can do HR, right? So essentially, you obviously take a call. You have to take a call, and no one else can take a call on your behalf. Secondly, you go on a belief, right, based on certain data points, but there is some intuition, some gut feel as well, right? And then you can solidify that belief by actually performing in roles, wherever you've landed up, right? So I think that becomes extremely important. I think the other kind of, I won't say regret. Essentially, if while in college, you think of yourself only as a professional, but as you age, personal life also becomes very important. So you see yourself as a whole self, personal plus professional. So what happens is, you take certain calls based on personal circumstances as well. So certain aspects which I did miss out in my career was, let's say, going international in my previous organization, just as an example. There were a couple of opportunities at different stages of my 8 years in an FMCG company, Marico, where I was offered international opportunities. And both times, circumstances were such that I could not make it, right, on the personal side. And as a result, I think that is something that could have panned out differently, but again, no regrets.
Perfect. I think this is a huge motivational factor, right? Where you do not look back and then regret further, move ahead with whatever decisions that you've taken. So like you've mentioned, sir, that you moved from an FMCG giant, Marico, to Godrej Capital, and you've been part of Godrej Capital since its pre-licensing stage.
Correct.
Now, a very interesting twist to this decision that you've taken is that you joined Godrej Capital during the time when the world was introduced to COVID.
Correct.
And you not only made a shift in the sector, that is moving from FMCG to Godrej Capital, but you also shifted from something that was well established to something that is just rising.
Correct.
And especially in a very volatile period like COVID. At this point, 3 years down the line, how does it feel? And what do you think about that decision that you've taken about transitioning from the sector at the same time, building up something from scratch in a very volatile period like that?
So when I'd accepted the offer, it was pre-COVID, so I did not have that inkling. Essentially, having done multi roles in Marico, I've had seen almost all roles, and I was also doing. I was also part of the FMCG forum in rewards. So that is a forum of about 15 to 16 top FMCG companies in India. So pretty much, when I interacted with them in the last 2 years at Marico, I got a sense of everything about those companies, right? So which means their policies, their structures, right? How they think, their strategy. So pretty much, I had an understanding of almost all top FMCG companies till the time I exited, and that was also a trigger point for me that you over the future of work is such that every 7 to 10 years, you will see a major career shift. Whether you lead it or you are led to it, that's a different matter. But I'm just saying that you will see it, right? So, and hence, I thought that it's a significant amount of time I spent. There's nothing very incremental to learn. and as a result, I'll make this shift into BFSI. I thought that BFSI is a significant evergreen kind of sector like FMCG, and hence I wanted to make that shift. Secondly, this was a startup that that in its pre-revenue stage and pre-license stage, and as a result, it became another point for me to join, given that I'd been in a steady state organization, and from an HR lens also, it made me realize that I could make something from scratch, not just partner with business, but on the reward side, make something from 0 to 100. Because anything that I did in my past organization was maybe a 5 to 10% incremental shift. So that took a very different kind of a ball game, and as a result, I wanted to explore that. I think the third thing what happens is in a startup, uh, people are more important than systems and processes and culture because they define that. Steady state, it's the exact opposite, right? So I found that the correct set of people, the set of leaders, the CXOs, when I met them, before during the interview stage, I thought that they were the right set of leaders who I admired, and as a result, I joined a group of people who happened to build that startup, which happened to be Godrej Capital.
Mm-hmm. All right. So from my understanding, you were very interested about this hustle factor in the startup, right? Maybe you wanted to move or experiment something which is more dynamic. So which is not something that you would get in something that is way more established.
Correct.
Now, at the same time, when this is a positive part of startup where it is very proactive, where you have to always be on your toes, with the fact that you entered during COVID time, especially you would be taking care about HR policies, recruitment, and you would also be having those personal crises at those point of time. There was also a time where in COVID, a lot of people lost their job, and entering a startup sector, you would face dilemma about how to go about recruitment. How should I build this company, keeping the future in mind? So these kind of personal doubts that you had towards recruitment and how should the company grow, how did you handle those decisions?
So one thing is to be nimble about it. So for example, small things in terms of systems, people didn't use Microsoft Teams as much, even though it was part of the Microsoft suite. Everyone uses Outlook, right? But it's just a behavior change. Secondly, people wanted to meet the candidate in person before offer, right? We had to change that behavior, right? And go completely online. A large part of our employees ended up getting offered, interviewed, offered, as well as joined virtually.
Okay.
So while that did present a challenge in enculturization and onboarding, but just the fact that we were able to convince people that okay, let's do that and let's go on that trust, right? I think that was a major mind shift. So that became extremely important. In terms of someone who did not, have any revenue at that point of time, it was a difficult market to hire from, very honestly. But looking back, this effort that we took paid us dividends in the manner that people who trust you and join you at that point of time are the most,
contributing
and loyal with you. Because anyone can choose to join a steady state and when things are going well, but when things are not well for you or people are not trusting you enough to join you as bulk folks, then it becomes important that the few who join you, you will realize that these are the people who really believe in the purpose and mission of the organization.
Very true. At the same time, something that clicked me about your profile was that, as you've said, that there was a point where you felt you feel a little stagnated with doing the same kind of work, right? And that's when you thought that you would want to shift into something which is more dynamic and that is more demanding. Now, you successfully sailed across different functions in HR, and that is a very interesting point that I noted about you. But when you talk about the Indian job market, something that we find today is that not everyone is very successful in moving past the stagnation that they feel, or they could also be facing a point where they are being extremely specialized into a particular domain which might not be having a market outside. So because of which they feel demotivated, or it could also be a fact that, especially we are in 2023, we're not sure if COVID again is going to haunt again. And there's a lot of crisis or there's a lot of doubt in the mind of Indian employees saying that if at all we face such a situation, would I be competent enough today in the job market? Am I still having the right set of skill? So being in HR, I'm sure you would have faced a lot of situations where employees feel demotivated, that they feel a sense of stagnation and due to which they do not feel committed towards their work. And as I told, we cater to a huge set of audience, right? So there would be a lot of people in our audience today who would be facing this situation where they feel stagnated and they're not motivated to do their work as well. So how do you face about such a situation?
I think what becomes important is twofold. One is to actually, have a conversation with the employer, which is extremely, honest and transparent, right? A few people just want to, beat about the bush and be very sweet, right? I don't think that's the right way to go about it because employees are adults, right? And as a result, we should have a very transparent conversation. Whatever is, if there is anxiety, we should allay those fears, right? And we should back the employee. But on the other hand, we should also be clear, and be honest about their observations, right? So, for example, if the job market is such that it's not going to be one role and it's going to be skill based, right? Then the person has to develop lateral skills. They have to upskill. Telling them and that okay, everything's going to be all right may not be the right approach. Correct. So it's extremely important to be very directed and very helpful and honest with the person. I think that helps. And once the person understands, then change management happens. In any change management cycle, as HR folks would know, it starts with denial and then it moves to the acceptance stage. And if the person does not believe, then whatever you say, no change will happen.
So how much percentage do you think as an employee, imagine I'm an employee and I'm at a phase where I feel stagnated in my job. And what do you think should be the right approach where how much percentage of effort should I put in to upskill myself? At the same time, there is also an equal amount of percentage of effort that the company from their side also will have to put in, right? To make sure that I'm also feeling motivated about my job or I'm giving an extra opportunity in my job as well. So is this something that is a conflict in organizations or is it something that you think has to be inculcated in all organizations where even organizations provide an equal support? At the same time, we can see that motivation in employees also to upskill and to improve.
I think I'll get a bit technical on this. Essentially, if a company is well read and well researched, right, they would know that the future of work is not neat. What happens typically is 70% of the jobs that exist today, 60% of their job description will remain and 40% will go away. So any kind of automation, that happens is not neat. It takes away part of the job description. And hence, to answer your question, you look at your job description and see as to what are those 30-40% skills that you can add to make up for that 100% job description.
Yeah.
And hence that makes more sense than actually looking for a new role, because roles are something which are accumulation of agendas or accumulation of skills. But if you are able to fill up the 30-40% of your job description, right, then you'll be ready for tomorrow.
True. I think that clearly makes sense. So when we talk about job description, there is this conflict that happens today, right? It's not generalists who are needed and it's probably specialists who are needed. At the same time, there is a set of category of people who believe the other way around, saying that you should be an all-rounder.
Correct.
What is something that you would look for?
That's a never-ending debate because what happens is it depends on the leader who you ask, because then it depends on how the leader has themselves developed. So I think what research tells us is that the future of work will be T-shaped. When I say T-shaped, it means that you will need to have a width of roles or skills or that you would have done, and go deep in maybe a couple of areas. So I think that is the right combination that works. What that also does is, and it answers one of your previous questions on stagnation, is that it opens up a lot of opportunities. So for example, I may have done learning and development and I may have done rewards. Now I'm better at rewards, just as an example. But the next opening that's there is not of rewards. But because I've done learning and development, I can, I don't have any choice, and then okay, I can pitch myself for a learning and development role. So that takes care of the stagnation point as well.
Yeah, so I think what you mean to say is that it's always good to have multiple skill set, but at the same time, you should also be sure that you're very clear and specific about those skill set rather than just having a surface level knowledge about them.
That's one, and the second is also that there's also a parallel debate as to how many number of years should you do one role.
Okay.
Right. So typically, I've heard answers from 1 year to 2 year to 3 years. Right. So I feel that when you see that T-shape, right, whatever you don't want to go deep in, you can do a shorter tenure of the role, right? And wherever you want to go deep, you do at least 3 to 4 years in the role. So how the market sees it is that, and that's where your point on stagnation is that once a person does a role for 4 to 5 years or more, their inclination to take up something new as well as the market's inclination to give them something new reduces.
True. And right now we're discussing about employee motivation and how they should upskill. Something that's on a rise today, or something which is very popular today, is the gig economy.
Right.
And we've seen the rise of gig economy, especially because a lot of people would want to experiment. They want to, or they find gig as something that is a motivating factor for them. It could be pursuing their passion, or it could be finding out time to do something different. How do you think India would welcome gig economy? And it's just a general perception that probably the finance sector is a little rigid, probably about gig or maybe some doing any role apart from the role that has been assigned. So how do you think India as a country is welcoming gig, and how do you think the finance sector would be welcome?
I think India always had the gig economy. Of all the jobs in India, only 6% is organized and 94% is unorganized. So the unorganized is always gig. So India has always been a gig economy. I think that's just the terminology that has come in recently. I think what the gig economy reinforces is the value that people put on skills these days, rather than the degree. And the fact that the person needs to do, let's say, 5 or 6 things rather than just one thing. But that takes a mindset, because that takes a learning mindset, that takes a more resilience mindset, because what happens is at some point you may not have anything to do. So are you ready for that? A lot of people go for the comfort of that salary on the 30th of the month, right? And that stops. But are you ready to do that? And there has always been right now because it's online, and when you say gig economy, while it's offline as well, a lot of it is online, and hence people find it quite meaningful. But then it has always been there offline. So for example, working in a factory on a piece rate basis, or on a part-time basis, or on a seasonality basis in an agri kind of setup, has always been there. A lot of people, in the white collar workforce don't find that very appealing, but the jobs are there. I think the rise of the gig economy, especially in the internet era, is because the white collar employees are now getting into the gig workforce. I think that's the difference, because it's mostly online. And I think that is the difference, but it's a welcome change, because what happens is it's good for organizations, essentially because the organizations are able to take up the gig workforce for projects that are critical but time bound. So they will not be able to give a career to such employees, because it's not a perennial work, but it's project basis and absolutely required. So I think that's where it ties up very well. On the industrial context of financial services industry, you're right that it's a more regulated industry, and hence the opportunities are slightly lesser, I would say, especially on roles which deal with data and systems. But then frontline, to that extent, where you're selling, has always been a gig, right? Maybe on a commission basis, for example. And as a result, that has always been a large part of the workforce is actually there. So financial services has welcomed gig economy, but then it depends on which role you're talking about.
Okay, so when we have to incorporate a gig working culture, what are the changes in with respect to HR policies, or how do we change from the convention?
I think it's important for the team members to understand what is the scope of the role of the person who's come to do a gig. So I have in my organization there is some flexibility, and in the past we have had returning mothers, do a part-time role, and it was extremely important for people to know that this person has come in to do work, let's say 3 days in a week. These are the days where she will work, and only in the first half, from let's say 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It makes it very easy for the person to perform. Otherwise, there are unrealistic expectations. Secondly, for any gig person, what happens is it's important for the person to understand your culture and values, because otherwise you end up creating a very different organization as a subculture within the organization, and that becomes very difficult to reconcile or course correct in the future. So I think that essentially becomes very important. Apart from that, the code of conduct, HR policies, I think all of that has to be educated. I think awareness and education takes care, and expectation setting takes care of a lot of these elements. And so far as benefits are concerned, my belief is that HR policies and benefits should apply, equally, proportionately to a gig worker as it is to a permanent employee. I don't see that there should be a difference. So it should be proportionate. So if someone's applying for 5 days versus 3 days, so for the 3 days, it should apply for the person. There should be no difference, at least in that.
So we've talked about gig, and I'm sure there's a lot of jargons these days that you've missed, right? Especially with respect to COVID, there was a shift to online working, work from home, now gig, and then there's a popular term called as moonlighting. So if you could just enlighten us about what is actually the restructuring that is happening today in the HR world, and what are the possible changes that you would be expecting in the futures, and what is the biggest challenge today that is happening?
I think particularly on moonlighting, different organizations are reacting very differently in different industries. So I think we'll come to a common understanding maybe in a year's time. I think it's pretty new. At a fundamental level, I think it's a reconciliation that needs to happen between employee and employer. Right, from the employee end, they're saying that value me for the worth that I bring into the table, and for the employer, what they're asking of the employee is that. I trust you to deliver on your deliverables for what I'm paying you for, right? And that trust should not be broken. So I think somewhere down the line, organizations will succeed overcoming this where there's a trust bank, and organizations will suffer where there's a trust deficit. So I think it's all going to be on trust, because these days, it's more an era of autonomy and empowerment, right? It's no longer an era of command and control. So to that extent, I think it becomes important to have a continuous dialogue between employer and employer, right? And figure out what is very realistic, and have the element of flexibility in mind. Even after COVID-19 and during COVID-19, people have understood the importance of flexibility. And now that they've seen the benefits, people are not ready to let go of it.
So this challenge of flexibility you've spoken about, that's something that as an HR manager or as any HR employee would have to deal with, where they have to find a balance between what the company wants, at the same time what the employees are interested in.
Correct.
Now this applies to all roles as well, let it be gig, let it be moonlighting, etc. Because at one point it also comes across as a particular company is not allowing so and so employees, or so to face or to this very line, right, where you have to balance between what the employer wants and what the company needs.
Yeah.
Can you tell me if there is, today we've seen a lot of dynamic changes that's happening in the work environment. Are you expecting any other changes, or can you enlighten us about what could be the future, or what are we supposed to be prepared about, and how could the work life change in the future? Because it's very volatile, it's very dynamic at this point, to an extent that we are not even sure tomorrow if this will be the working style. So what is your view about what could be the future of work style?
So I think in India it's fairly insulated. While we are in a global economy and we will see global pressures hitting us, but it's far more insulated and better as compared to the rest of the world. I think fundamentally, future of work says that what is the nature of work, right? So if you see any work, it lies in any of the four categories, and you can help me tell if there's a fifth category, but I think that it's pretty exhaustive. So the first is strategic. right? So any kind of work that is to do with strategy, like coming up with a future of work or strategy for an organization or plan for the current year, that is something that typically may never get automated,
Okay.
right? So I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is creativity slash innovation. Right, that's the nature of work, and it applies to artists as well. So I'm taking all kind of work, right? Whether you're
Mhm.
doing it even at home. So again, that is also something that never gets automated. The third is repetitive work. Any
Yeah.
algorithm based, anything that can be algorithmized will get automated. I think we should be ready for that. We should embrace it, and we should contribute to it. In fact, I would say, right? Because then these machines will help us be more productive, right?
Mhm.
And the fourth is human interactions. So whether the population goes up, goes down, right? Depending on how many humans are there in at any point in the world, human interactions will be essential. Typically, that can't be automated. Maybe we can get more systematic about it, but and reduce the talk time. But then I think human interactions will never get automated. So I think if you are in the other three categories, right, rather than the category of repetitive work, I think that then I think you're pretty much safe, right? And you should upskill in those areas, I would say. Because what happens is, and that's very easy to evaluate, right? If you think that you get up in the morning and in the day, over the week are doing the same stuff, uh, I think everyone realizes that.
Yeah.
So to that extent, you will know that, okay, I should be doing something different, or at least learning something different and applying it very differently.
True. I mean, from whatever you've told, it's in fact a very new learning for me. And I think it's very easy for us also for upcoming corporates to understand what kind of job we have to enter and segmenting the job into these four categories so that we are aware about what is the possibility or what is the future of the particular kind of job that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And another question that I had in my mind was that although I do not want to start my new year with a bad talk, but I really want my listeners to be very much aware about what they have to be expecting in 2023. So we've heard reports about companies such as Microsoft who is trying to lay off 10% of their global workforce. At the same time, there are reports which says that about 66% of Indian CEOs think that India will be facing recession. And
Yeah.
of these 66%, 33% are ready to implement higher fees.
Hmm.
Now, as an HR, I would want a very honest opinion. Now, this is very personal. And what do you think an employee today should be doing? Should they be sticking to a chaotic job, or should they be trying to move ahead and try to upscale or try to find out a different path? So, what is your very honest opinion about the Indian job market today? Because it gives mixed opinions, right?
Correct. So I think what's important is I'll tell you from both points of view. One is what's within and what's extrinsic, so to speak. So for the person, for the candidate, for the employee, what's intrinsic is whether they are learning. That's one.
Mhm.
Second is job satisfaction, whether they're enjoying the job that they're doing. Right. These are the
Yeah.
two factors internal to the person. What's external to the person is that are they being valued by the organization? They do get a feeler, right? So that becomes important. And secondly, do they feel that they're being treated fairly? So when I say fairly, that has to do with anything, any processes, how people talk to you, what's the salary that you earn, what's the position in your hierarchy, right? Do you think it's fair? So I think when you go through these questions, right, and it's always a relative comparison. Otherwise, it always seems that the grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Yeah.
But then you suddenly end up saying, okay, where have I come to? Right. So to that extent, I think it's important to be relative about things, right? That okay, in this era in 2023, what's going to be more important to me? And if I compare two organizations, where am I better off? Right. Or if even within an organization, if I compare two roles in two different departments, where am I better off? Right. It becomes important. And I think short-term moves don't help. That's particularly my opinion, because uh, you are actually deviating from your career goals, or else you did not have it very clear in the first place, right? And then when you're questioned at a later point of time, it gets difficult for you to justify. If you're extremely clear that I am taking this detour for learning, right? Let's say my example, I get questions that I get questions because I've successfully navigated this because it's been 3 years. I get questioned that, okay, if I come from FMCG to BFSI, right? FMCG, I don't want to leave. And will I be falling behind others, if for example my batchmates, if for example I am changing sectors again, I have to learn from zero, right? FMCG is such a nice sector anyway, and why would I switch, right? And I think that's answers to your stagnation question, right? Which is
Yeah.
that, I mean, if you don't take the plunge, you may fail. But then, if you don't take the plunge, you'll never realize whether you're learning something new or not, and hence that stagnation happens. So I think this is the flow of thought, because if there is thought behind why you're making that change, then whether you succeed or fail does not matter. You learn from it. But if there's no thought behind it and you're just reacting to something which is an external circumstance, and you're doing something for 1 year, I don't think that ever helps.
So I think it's about always having a clear mindset about what you want, and it's
Yes.
not about just reacting to what the market is. As
Yes,
long as
and having a bit of a long-term mindset.
Mhm.
That becomes important. If you don't have a mindset for 3 to 5 years, how are you going to develop yourself? For me, for example, I had to learn about a startup, and before anything, I had to unlearn a lot of things. In
Mhm.
steady state companies, you get a bit comfortable. You also have a high, you develop the muscle of process orientation,
Mhm.
right? But a lot of that is not there in a startup, and hence understanding BFSI, understanding a new, company ethos like Godrej, and understanding BFSI, understanding startup, I think a lot of that takes time. So someone who just enters that for a year, right, will find it very difficult to actually complete that learning cycle before they move on to the next.
Mhm. I would just want to put it across this way that I think our listeners should also be very much aware about the fact that it's not something where you just have to react to. Suppose you think that the market is not at a very favorable state, you should rather be very clear about what you want. And this is a point that is valid across one's life throughout about knowing what you want. And it's not just with the case of employment. And reacting based on what you want rather than reacting based on what you think the market will be, right? I think this is exactly what you wanted to convey.
That's one. The other is that we should be extremely aware of our surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
while this is a real example, I'll take this as a hypothetical example. So
So,
essentially, there's this company who has a particular division, and that division has now let go of 75% of its workforce. Okay, that only that division, right? Not the entire company. Now, imagine that when there were these X 100% of people in the company and everyone was hired, etc. Were you, for example, would you guess that they would have been aware, looking in the surroundings, that maybe there's not as much work, or maybe the future seems a bit iffy, right? So I think you get a sense, right? But because maybe one gets comfortable, right, or one trusts the organization, then it becomes a bit difficult to overcome that thought process, right? And there's nothing right or wrong about it. But then the point is that if there has been a 75% reduction somewhere, it means that the dominoes had started falling quite a while back. So to that extent, I think self-awareness and the surrounding awareness is extremely important for the person, right? And hence the question: are you adding value on a daily basis? Right? If you are adding value on a daily basis, then you will not get into that situation. But if you feel that, okay, I've been too comfortable, right? Then obviously you don't see these things coming up. So you think about it that, okay, why is nothing new coming in every month, right? If nothing new is coming in every month, you start to question as to, okay, is this company not doing something new,
Mhm.
right? So I think a bigger thought process, understanding the strategy and plans of the organization or the particular division vertical, becomes extremely important, I feel.
True, I agree to that. In fact, I think when we had a discussion first, I was telling about the interpretation of what is the big small talk.
Right.
And we've had multiple interpretations when we came up with this name. The first was that every small decision that made it big. Now, there's also another interpretation where we talk about big things. At the same time, we talk about small personal things as well. So we've covered a lot of big topics like recession, gig, and a lot more. So I think let's shift to the small talk part of it. And with small talk, what I mean is let's get to know, or I want my listeners to also know more about you as a person. Because it's still New Year vibes for us right now. I wanted to know if you had any resolutions in mind and how do you go about New Year resolutions and decisions on new plans that you want to execute for 2023?
Um, it's important. I think I am not a big believer in it, very honestly. Uh, and there's nothing right or wrong about it. I am such a person who will have something in mind, which is a bit vague in the longer term. Like a year is a longer term for me. But in the shorter term, I'll be very precise. So for example, I'll have a 1 month or 2 month goal. So let's say I have a weight reduction goal. So that'll be, okay, what can I do in these 1 or 2 months? To keep it very actionable, that's my thought process, right? And that applies to other activities that I do. So I think that is currently where I am. And I think in a year's time becomes very templatized, I feel, if you do it. And hence, I just, let situations hit me, or if I want to do something, I discuss with friends, and we take something up for maybe a quarter at the max, not something which is for the year.
So short-term plans is something that you would like to execute rather than a
Correct.
new year resolution, right?
Correct.
So as we're approaching towards the end of our session, and as I told even beginning that we cater to a larger sector of audience. So what is one thing that you would want to tell to somebody who's just entering their MBA life, to somebody who's moving out of it, and somebody who is currently a corporate? From your years of experience, what is something that you would want to tell to each three sectors?
So I think to someone who's entering MBA, my belief is that multitasking does not help, and hence focus in a distracted world is extremely important. So when you're doing something, don't look at your phone. There's small things. I'm just focusing on the smaller aspect. You can extrapolate it. Uh, I see a lot of students because now things have become virtual as well in terms of internships, life projects. I see people take up a lot of experiences every 2 months, and they continue to do it continuously. 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. So I think there's nothing right or wrong about it. I'm just saying that question that why are you there in that MBA? You're there in that MBA to actually do the MBA, right? So that has to take first preference. And are you doing enough justice to it, right? And if you're doing justice to it, beyond that, you can do hundreds of things. But if you feel that that's getting compromised, then you need to really question. So I think focus is extremely important. Focus and prioritization is the key, because you know that while you can do an internship at a later point of time, right, something that is optional, uh, you can you these 2 years will not come back. Right. So I think to that MBA, and someone who's just getting out of MBA, I think I was as clueless. So to that extent, take up a job, explore. I think it's actually a very wonderful opportunity that you don't get segmented, and in the first 2 3 years you only explore and get to a nice sweet spot. May not be the final spot that you're going to do, but at least a good understanding in those 2 3 years. Discover yourself. You'll talk, have a very good support group, because you'll face a lot of challenges, and hence a lot of good colleagues, a lot of good support group will help. A lot of a few mentors will also help, who have seen this, done this, and would be able to guide you well. You may avoid a few failures that they would have experienced. So I think it's important to get that perspective. Just absorb. Humility becomes extremely important. Don't be a know-it-all just because you're from a let's say a good B school. So I think that becomes extremely important. And uh, just sharing my example as well, I have seen myself being challenged, and I have seen myself questioning me, that okay, I have done my MBA, should I be really doing this particular job, right? So I remember just into my corporate stints. Although I was in HR, I was asked to do sales, right? So and then when I am there in the retail shop selling, I always used to question it. Okay, is this how it is? So to that extent, I think sometimes you question. I think you'll have to trust the system, and as a result, you go with the flow. You try to do your best, and again that focus element, and then no education goes waste. That also answers your chemical engineering question, that I don't think any kind of perspective or education goes waste, right? And essentially, you can always tie it up looking backwards. So I think that becomes extremely important, and also the kind of logic that you develop in a different context, because HR you will always do, right? But when you see these different situations, different locations, different roles, it opens up your perspective like never you will see in the future. So and it also happens that in future, to answer the third part of the question, for someone who's a bit more experienced, is that now if you have completed, let's say, one leg of the HR journey, right, where you've done different roles in HR, different locations, etc., it might make some sense to do a non-HR role that has some P&L, profit and loss accountability, because that opens up a perspective that helps you become a CHRO in the future. Because a CHRO is a CXO body, part of the CXO body, where they need to do non-HR things as well, or add non-HR perspectives as well, because they are part of the top leadership, right? And as a result, doing a role which is PNL led, will accelerate one's career, is what I feel. So that would be some kind of a bit different advice.
I think that was a very elaborate and very insightful answer as well, and I'm very happy that we've catered to all three segments also. And so we have approached towards the end of our session. So I would first of all want to thank you for taking time to do this. And it was wonderful talking to you. I've learned a lot having this conversation with you, and I'm sure our listeners also have had a lot of things to pick up as well. So thank you once again, and I hope you have a brilliant year ahead, and meet you sometime soon later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Surinder. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks to the team as well for having me.